and welcome back to another episode of the Abraham Watkins podcast. My name is Jeffrey Atkinson. Today I'm here with our of counsel, Miss Jennifer O'Brien Stogner. How you doing?
Doing good.
So, how did you make your way to Houston?
Actually, I wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was little. And my dad actually graduated from South Texas College of Law in Houston. And so after I finished college, I made the decision to go to law school and ended up in Houston. That's his alma mater. And, the rest is history.
So you always want to be a lawyer from the wee ages of 4 or 5 years old?
I mean, honestly, probably at 2 or 3, if you'd asked me, I wanted to be a princess. And then there was probably some Barbie years in between. There might have been, like a Rainbow Bright, because that's kind of my age. Sorry to date myself. But yeah, I can remember going to career day in 2nd grade, borrowing my daddy's briefcase and borrowing one of my mom's scarves, so I had something high-necked, and thinking that I was going to be a lawyer someday.
Gotcha. And what kind of law did your father practice?
So my dad actually still practices law. He has actually been practicing as of this year 50 years, and he does wills, trust, and probate. And so I actually worked for him my last 2 years of college, because my dad thought that I only wanted to be a lawyer because I saw it on TV, and he was like, Law and Order's great, and LA Law's great, and all those other law things are great, but you should really come in and see what it's like to work in a law office every day and see the stuff that isn't, worthy of the 1 hour episode on TV.
A lot more into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so why did you not pursue that type of law?
I always wanted to be in the courtroom, and unfortunately for the area of wills, trusts, and estates, while you might hear about those, Anna Nicole Smith, that husband that she had, I can't remember his name, and all those kinds of estate disputes and trust disputes, I really wanted to do true trial litigation. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I was a debater in high school. I was on the mock trial team in high school, and really? I love it.
Okay,
yeah.
So you were training from the teenage years. Okay.
I started talking early, and as my father puts it, I started talking back almost as soon as I started talking. So apparently this was the right field for me.
So where did you go to undergrad?
I went to undergrad at A&M Corpus Christi. I actually started at A&M.
Okay.
And my mom got really ill. And back in the day before Obamacare, medical treatment and prescriptions were really expensive. And so try to make it work with a family of 3. This is the balance we found. And so I ended up graduating from A&M Corpus, and I actually started a master's program and was, a year and a half into it. And I looked around and I was like, I actually didn't mean to be doing this. I really want to go to law school. And so I took the LSAT and applied and got in a bunch of places, but went to South Texas, and it was a good fit. It was my dad's alma mater, and I felt like that was the right place for me. I felt like all paths kind of led there.
South Texas. Okay. So that's why you chose. And then you said you wanted to be in the courtroom, but I guess why would you choose, or why did you choose personal injury versus defense, convicted felons, or any other kind of law that actually goes in the courtroom, like you said on Law and Order?
Well, I would say that when I was little, I didn't actually really care what kind of law I was going to practice. I just really wanted to be in the courtroom and be arguing. But then when I was 20, I was actually going out on a first date. And back then, before the days of Uber and, basically cell phones, other than analog digital, which kids, I'm sure you don't know what that is. I would go out on my first date, and I would insist on driving myself. We would meet just in case it went south. I wanted an out, and I didn't want to have to get a cab or any of that other stuff. And so I was going out on a first date that night, and I went through an intersection at 7:30 at night, and a drunk driver turned out from behind an 18-wheeler that was stopped in the left turn lane and struck me head on, full speed, spun me around. And I went through about 2 years of medical treatment after that wreck. I still have neck pain, that just has never gone away. And at the time, the minimum limits in Texas were $15,000, $30,000. And so despite all of the medical treatment I needed, it broke 2 of my front teeth. $15,000 was it. And I felt like that was wrong. And I felt like I had appreciated my dad's efforts in helping me. And I knew these kinds of things happen to other people. And I knew the physical effects, not to the extent that some people have them, but I knew the physical effects on myself in my early 20s. And I felt like that was an area where when wrongdoers hurt somebody and, cause permanent injuries, there's got to be someone who takes up for them. And since I've walked that road before, I wanted to help other people who found themselves in the same situation.
Okay, so your father was your attorney
he was.
in that situation?
He was.
Okay. Not to throw your dad under the bus, but where you are now in your career, as far back as you can remember on that incident, how do you feel like someone who doesn't do personal injury every day compared to, we talked to Benny about this on another podcast episode, but how do you feel somebody that doesn't do personal injury every day compares to someone that does personal injury every day in these type of situations?
Well, so my dad did some personal injury.
Okay.
It was one of those things where, he enjoys estate planning. His first job, I know this is kind of nerdy, but his first job right out of law school was for the IRS. And so that's kind of where his bread and butter's always been. He doesn't want to go to trial. Okay. And I understand that. Some people just aren't meant to be trial lawyers. And I think my father did a great job representing me. But with the kinds of complex issues that come up these days, the way all of the discovery and litigation rules have changed, going with a lawyer in a situation like that where you're hit by a drunk driver who doesn't necessarily delve into these areas, they may not know what kind of data to request, what kind of information. Those things didn't exist really when I was injured, but today they do. And so if you don't get a download from the other person's vehicle, if you don't inspect their vehicle, if you don't get their cell phone, if you don't capture the data that exists and the information that exists immediately by hiring someone who knows what to look for, has the resources and the personnel to go get it before it gets erased or written over or whatever the program is, you can really lose out on a lot of things that are very important and that will ultimately explain things that otherwise it's just a he said, she said. Mm-hmm. So, but I love my dad, and I still think he's a great lawyer.
Oh, of course. No, I didn't mean anything like that.
Because I'm going to get in trouble for this after the fact. You realize that, right?
So you've mentioned a couple times that you want to be a trial lawyer. You enjoy trial law. Mm-hmm. What goes into being a trial lawyer versus something else, some other kind of lawyer? I don't know. What are those kind of details that you would say set you apart, or what kind of do y'all do day to day that's different?
I think it's some of it is part detective. Some of it is part, taking what information, what data we can gather, what our experts can gather from vehicle downloads or from vehicle inspections, from interviews with people, witness statements, and trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. What caused this accident to happen this way? Why did a vehicle flip? How did the angle of this vehicle hitting that one cause these injuries? Some of it's part detective, and some of it's part kind of field general of we know we need to go get this information. We know we need to attack them on these points. We need to get their HR file. We need to get their driver qualification file if it's an 18-wheeler. We need to go and figure out, did this driver of an 18-wheeler get drug tested or alcohol tested within the required federal standards? And so it's a lot of putting it together and also knowing, when you can take advantage of situations. And also knowing when you shouldn't take advantage, that in the long term for the good of the case, yes, you might have a small win here, but you could end up losing the war because of it. Having the experience to know when to press and when to pull back, when to make agreements and when to fight is really, just like anything else, a lot of virtue of both your education, but also just practical experience.
Okay. Now going to your experience, graduated law school, South Texas. Mm-hmm. What happened in between South Texas and Abraham Watkins?
So when I graduated from law school, my first job out of law school was for a firm called Brent Kuhn & Associates. And I was very fortunate because they were in need of folks. And at that point in time, the BP Texas City explosion had just occurred.
So personal injury?
Yes, okay. Personal injury. And so I somehow, some way, was fortunate enough to make the trial team for that case. And we ended up going down not once, but twice to Galveston to try that case. And so I learned a lot about the petrochemical industry. I learned a lot about presenting damages, about putting together a liability case. I mean, in that case, there were, 1 million+ documents produced. And so how do you sift through and sort through to find out what's most important, what has the biggest impact, and what's just, what can be left on the cutting room floor? And then from there, I went to go work for a products liability firm. And then I pivoted over to some insurance and some Hurricane Ike claims. And then I started having children. And having children, being a plaintiff's lawyer, is harder than you might think. So for about 5 years, I was a defense lawyer. And then I had 3 kids, did defense work, had a steady paycheck and a 9-to-5 job that was very predictable, so that I could be home when I needed to be home and I could take off when I needed to. And then at some point, my husband didn't necessarily like all the evaluations I made of his cases because I'd switched to the other side. And I believe at one point he came home one night, told me about a case he's about to go mediate. I gave him a case value, and he was like, if you continue doing this on this side of the docket, I don't know how much longer we're going to be married. And thus the discussion of me returning back to the plaintiff's bar began. And so in order to avoid any conflicts before coming over to Abraham Watkins, I went and worked for another plaintiff's firm for about a year, just to basically exhaust the cases that I'd worked on and make sure that it wasn't going to be some sort of issue for me to hire on over here. And I've been over here for the last 5 years. And it's been great. My husband and I work together. We live together. We don't always agree, but we haven't killed each other yet. So fingers crossed, things looking up. But it's been a great experience, and I'm truly blessed to not only be married to one of the partners here, but also have the ability to practice law with him.
Well, great. Now you are of counsel here.
That is correct.
What does of counsel mean for those that don't know at home that aren't lawyers watching?
Of counsel basically means that I'm not like other associates. I'm not on the partnership track. I am here to practice law, but I kind of have the ability to keep my own schedule because, again, I got 3 kids. And they're all still in elementary school, so there's a lot of juggling that goes with that. And it also doesn't make me competition for other associates. Nobody gets jealous if I work on a case with them. I'm not trying to take it from them. We can all work together as a team.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
Very good. Now that you are a little further in your career, you start taking on some more responsibilities. You are now the alumni president for South Texas.
That's correct.
How did that come about?
So I became a member of the board, I think in about 2017, 2018. It's a volunteer position. You're not paid for it at all. And rotated my way around different positions in the board, and was fortunate enough to become the alumni president in 2022. And that meant that in 2023, when we had our 100th anniversary, I was president of our law school. And so we had a 100th gala last year, and this is actually the first time that we've had a 2-year term president, because we're going to move to more of a 2-year structure because it's a lot of work. And just to get completely up to speed on how everything works, the ins and outs of everything. If I handed over the gavel, after the first year, it took me 6 months to figure it all out, get the lay of the land, meet all the people. And so it's truly been a blessing. We're working on a capital campaign right now to improve courtrooms in the law school, to improve the overall classroom experience, to upgrade some of the digital formats. And so it's been very rewarding. And quite frankly, South Texas means a lot to me. Obviously it's where my dad got his education. It's where I started law school. I met my husband the very first day of law school orientation. I was fortunate enough to be on 14 different advocacy teams while I was in law school, won a national title with my husband, and ultimately won a bunch of speaker awards in between. And then ultimately our coach in advocacy, Dean T. Gerald Treese, actually performed our wedding ceremony because he was one of the few people that knew us both, knew how crazy we both were and how crazy we both were for each other. And so he was really a great blessing in our lives. And he always said, in order to be able to honor what you've been given, you've got to give back. And so that's what we're trying to do. And most of the avenues that we're involved in, whether it's our kids' school, whether it's South Texas, whether it's sports, anything out at the office and even in the office, we're trying to give back. We're trying to pay it forward to, show that we've been blessed and we want to pass that blessing along. Okay.
And I don't know if you can think of one thing, but if there's a couple goals you have as being the president, what are those goals? Is there 1 or 2 or 3 things that you really hope to hammer home during your 2 years as president?
I think one of the things is relationships, is that you forget necessarily like school, regular school, those relationships will matter when you get out of law school, and that you should lean on each other, that you are not competition for each other. I mean, I know you are generally, but that look to each other, help each other, support each other, be there for each other when it gets hard for one of you in this job or another job. Help each other out, give each other drafts of things, work together, because the practice of law at times is a grind. It truly is. The deadlines don't stop. It doesn't care if it's Christmas, New Year's, someone's wedding, someone's baby shower. The law keeps coming, and so do the deadlines. So keep your relationships close and try to work together. I might have started out a little bit 10 foot tall and bulletproof, or at least maybe I thought I was. And I might not have always made agreements when I should have, just because I didn't know that it was okay for me to do that. I felt somehow I was losing. And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more experience I've gotten, the more, we can make agreements, get on the phone, talk it out. A lot of times we'll paper it, but sometimes I can deal with lawyers where it's still just a good old-fashioned handshake deal. And so I hope that people understand that. I hope that people understand that at the end of the day, who you are as a law student, who you are as a lawyer, you form a reputation one way or the other. And I want to be the kind of lawyer who, when I give you my word, you can take it to the bank. And if for some reason things go south, you're not going to hear it from somebody else. I'm going to be the first one to pick up the phone and tell you, hey, look, something's happened. Because I want us to be able to do business together in the future. And if I tell you that we have a deal, I want you to believe me, and I want to be able to believe you.
Okay. So, pivoting into more of your cases that you worked on recently, we've posted some TikToks of, well, first let's get into the definition of some of these cases. So, you've reached 20 and 30 times policy limits. A lot of people hear policy limits and think that's as high as you can go. Policy limits. I got policy limits. So let's go into, what is a Stowers demand, and how does that kind of work its way into going above policy limits?
Okay. So a Stowers demand it's called Stowers, not because it has some special meaning, but because that's the specific case in Texas that created this kind of demand. And what a Stowers demand is it's a written demand to the insurance company for typically the defendant, that basically says, dear insurance company, on X date, the defendant, you're insured, hit me, rear-ended me, push, whatever the case may be. Typically, it's an automobile insurance policy. Both of those cases that we're about to talk about were as well. And it says, essentially, liability is reasonably clear. You rear-ended me. I didn't rear-end you. Typically, most of us know that a rear-ender is the person who hits you from behind. So the first requirement is that liability must be reasonably clear from the insurance company's point of view, as well as the insured or the driver who hits you. It should be reasonably clear it's your fault. 2 is that a demand is being made for an amount within the policy limits of the policy that was in effect at the time of the collision. Okay? That a reasonable insurer, when faced with this demand, and when faced with a clear liability, would accept the demand in order to prevent what's called an excess judgment or an excess verdict against their insured. In other words, for example, if there's a $100,000 policy limit and it's a clear liability collision, and I have over $150,000 in medical bills because I've had some very severe injuries as a result of that crash. If I send your insurance company a letter that says, Jeff hit me, he rear-ended me, he got a ticket from the police officer, so it's obviously his fault, he pled guilty and paid that ticket. I've got all these medical bills. They're related to injuries that I sustained in the accident because I went to the ER that night. I treated regularly, and it's all the same injury. There's no injury that pops up 6 months, 18 months later. And I'm offering, even though I have $150,000 in medical bills, I am offering today to settle this case for the $100,000 limits that you extended to Jeff. So I'm making a good deal. $150,000 claim for $100,000 because that's all he's got. Under those circumstances, the Stowers doctrine says that an insurance company's ultimate duty is to protect its insured. That's why you buy car insurance to begin with,
right.
So that you have protection if something happens, if you make a mistake. And that's ultimately, more often than not, what causes car wrecks to begin with. And so because they have a duty to protect you, that's what they sold you to begin with. They sold you a policy that says, just in case, Jeff, we'll protect you if a claim's made. Under those circumstances, when they get my letter that says, yep, it's Jeff's fault, yep, she's hurt, yep, the damages clearly exceed our policy, we should pay this, and they don't, then we call that what's called a breach of Stogner's. And under those circumstances, essentially, we consider it to be the policy is open. So in other words, I no longer have to agree to settle my $150,000 in medical bills for $100,000, because my argument's going to be, well, you left Jeff out high and dry. So we'll go take this case to trial. I'll get whatever my full damages are. And then instead of turning around and trying to take Jeff's stuff, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, Jeff, if you would give me your claim against your insurance company, because they should have protected you, we shouldn't even have to go to trial, then I won't execute this judgment. You can keep all your stuff, but I'm going to go get my money in addition to that $100,000. I'm going to go get all the rest of my money from the insurance company. I'm going to leave you alone. And typically that works out for the betterment of everybody. Now, you might not be particularly jazzed about it because you've been drugged through a trial you didn't want to have to go through, and an accident you already admitted you caused. But at the end of the day, that is an insurance company's duty to protect their insured in exchange for premiums. That's how they make their money. So when an insurance company does not respond appropriately to a Stogner's demand, then we consider, and it has to be under the right circumstances. It can't just be every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's got to have the right kind of damages, the right kind of liability. There are lots of little ins and outs that we'd be here for days to talk about. But under the right circumstances, we send them a letter that says, we now believe that you have blown Stogner's, and we are now going to pursue the full extent of our damages. And sometimes we end up in court over that, and more often than not, we just end up getting it resolved out of court, put it like that.
Okay. So the person at fault in the accident, do they know anything's going on, or are they just leaving it up to their insurance company to handle, and then all of a sudden, oh, they blew Stogner's? You're not calling the defendant, right? The insured person.
We can't. Right. Once litigation has started, and once the defendant has counsel, we can't directly reach out to them. However, we typically do request that defense counsel provide a copy of our letter to their client, who isn't the insurance company. Right. It's actually the person who caused the accident. Now. Well, technically they're on the hook, but we don't go after the personal assets of other people. We know the difference between an insurance company that doesn't do its job and a hardworking person whose insurance company didn't do their job.
Yeah, they're sitting there like, what's going on?
Exactly. I'm not trying to take somebody's house. I'm not trying to do that kind of stuff. Insurance companies make an awful lot of money. And if you've ever looked at their balance and income statements, I promise you, any one claim is not going to bankrupt them.
Right. Okay. So let's. What happened in the case where we received 20 times the policy limits?
Okay, that was a car wreck case.
Okay.
It was just an average car wreck case, but this one was a T-bone collision. It caused very extensive damage to the vehicle. The client had multiple surgeries, and when we initially sent the Stogner's demand, she had a surgical recommendation for a neck fusion. And we specifically said, if you don't pay us, she's going to go get the surgery, and we're going to assume that you blew Stogner's. And they rejected our demand, and ultimately she did end up having the surgery. She did need it. She had all of the follow-up care. She still had some lingering pain, continued to treat. And so we took the position that you knew the accident was your driver's fault. You knew that she had extensive medical bills and extensive future treatment recommendations, and you rolled the dice on negotiating the claim. And when you did that, you breached Stogner's. You breached your duty to the defendant that caused this accident to protect them. And now the insurance company's on the hook for any amount over and above the policy limits. So ultimately, with the extent of her medical care and making sure that we had checked the boxes on all those little other issues that we won't go into, we ultimately were able to obtain a settlement before trial of the first case for 20 times the policy limits. So it was originally a $100,000 policy. We were able to get a total settlement or gross settlement of $2 million for our client.
And why would the insurance company just not take the $100,000? Do they not know the extent of somebody's injury? Do they think we're not telling the truth? Why would you just not pay the $100,000? Because if we don't, we might be on the hook for something more. Why would they not just pay it and be done with it? Why do they try? Are they trying to penny pinch?
Well, I mean, insurance companies are in the business of risk, and they also are in the business of negotiation. I mean, I'm sure you've gone to the doctor and gotten one of those EOBs in the mail that's like 4 pages long and explains what treatment you'd gotten and what they paid and what they didn't, what they allowed and what they didn't. You know, for having health insurance, some of that stuff, a lot of that stuff isn't covered, or at least isn't covered completely. And you have to go through the process of appealing and all that kind of stuff. Insurance companies don't become billionaires and trillionaires unless they fight every claim that comes along.
Right.
Now, sometimes they take the risk and they take the gamble and deny us ours, and there are lawyers on the other side of the case that will still continue to negotiate. And we do that sometimes too. But again, under the right circumstances with the right case, I think we are more than capable of digging our heels in and saying, no, this was one where your risk of negotiating for any amount less than the policy limits was a mistake. And taking that gamble has consequences. And in this case, for every dollar that they would have had to pay under the original policy limits, the insurance company paid $19 more of their own money to make up for the gamble that they made and that they lost.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess going back to Stowers though, the just so I'm clear, the person who was insured that caused the accident doesn't pay any more out of pocket. They just pay the premium and they just leave it to the insurance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, it's actually a provision of the insurance policy. The insurance policy actually requires, at least in Texas, that you allow the insurance company to direct your defense. They provide you with a lawyer. It's one of the things they're required to do under the insurance policy, but they're allowed to direct the defense. They're allowed to direct the litigation strategy, and they're ultimately allowed to direct all negotiations, which is why when we send a Stowers demand, one of the things that's listed is we request, but we can't make you, we request that you actually give your client a copy of this letter so that they know we're making an offer to settle this case within the limits that they purchased from you. And we'd like them to basically have a say in this. Whether or not the insurance company does it or the lawyer does it, different story altogether.
Yeah, because the client can't make them pay.
An insured cannot make an insurance company pay if the insurance company has made a determination that it won't or it won't pay above a certain level.
Gotcha. Okay. So going into the 30 times policy limit case, is that similar to the 20 times or is that totally different?
That one was different.
Okay.
It was a lady who involved basically kind of a premises liability case, but ultimately a lady was pushed and fell out of a swing, and she broke her back. Okay. And so she had to have an emergent surgery. Very nice lady, and ultimately we were able to recover 30 times the policy limits in that one. And nice people, truly nice people. The right circumstances for the right case, and a great settlement for all involved, I think.
Okay. So just so for people at home, what is premises liability?
Premises liability is a case where there is a dangerous condition on the property that is unreasonably dangerous. That's what the law calls it. That is either not warned of, not open and obvious, and not made safe by the landowner or, for example, the tenant if it's, a long-term lease, that kind of thing. Okay. So, in other words, if I have a tiger pit that I dig right at the door to my office and I put a sign out front that says, beware, tiger pit, just as you walk in, I've warned you of it. I can't really make the tiger pit safe, but I've warned you of it, okay?
Okay.
If I say, warning, tiger pit, but I have at least bars on the top so the tigers can't reach through and try and grab you, I've tried to do both because I've warned and tried to make it safe. Mm-hmm. But also if, for example, I don't put the tiger pit right at the door of my office, but the tiger pit is in the middle of a field and it's the only thing in the field and it's easy to see because the grass is mowed and there's tigers that every once in a while jump out of it. And out of all the places in the whole field, you walk right up to the tiger pit and jump in. That's an open and obvious condition. In other words, everyone should be able to tell reasonably with their own eyes that a tiger pit is unreasonably dangerous and not to jump in it.
Right.
So premises liability cases in Texas are very difficult. And typically they require very specific factual showings so that, you can make sure that a landowner knew about the condition. In other words, if a tiger just came onto my property and jumped into my swimming pool, I might not know that has occurred. So how can I warn you about it or make it safe if I'm just finding out in the same moment you are? Texas does a lot to try and protect landowners, but in certain circumstances, we've had some success with some major retailers who, for example, have things on the floor in areas that don't involve groceries or stuff like that. No one has any idea it's there. They walk around the corner and break their kneecap. Those kinds of things would obviously be a problem, and that would be a premises liability case that we would pursue.
Okay. So how did premises liability, factor into this case where she was injured in a swing?
Yeah. So from our perspective, it wasn't really that kind of case. Okay. It was just a negligence case. But, because it was a condition, it's one of those things where the other side argued, well, it wasn't me that pushed the swing and broke her back. It was the alternative, which is the swing was defective. Mm-hmm. If the swing's defective because of the way it's installed, that would be a condition on the premises that would necessarily warrant a premises liability claim. But at the end of the day, we just think it was a negligence claim.
Okay. And same thing, we sent a Stowers demand, and they just said, well, we don't think it's worth that. We're not going to pay it. We'll roll the dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so after a long process, ultimately we got it resolved, and the client got a very good settlement and was very happy. And, I can't change the fact that her back is broken, but I know that I was able to get her, 30 times what otherwise she would have received.
Policy limits, okay. Mm-hmm. And it was homeowners insurance, would that be? Who kind of covered this kind of incident? Mm-hmm. Okay. So homeowners would cover it. Okay. All right. Let's talk about car wrecks a little bit.
Sure.
Especially in Texas. There's a lot of issues going on with paper plates. I think they just passed a law that said they're no longer going to do paper plates. They're just going to mail or the dealer's just going to give you their metal plates right at the time of purchase because there's so many issues with paper plates and uninsured motorists and that kind of thing. What can the average Houstonian or Texan do to guard against getting into an accident with somebody with paper plates or getting into an accident with somebody with no insurance? Well, first, isn't everybody required to have insurance to operate a motor vehicle?
Yes, everybody's required to have insurance to operate a motor vehicle, but just like everybody's also required to have a valid driver's license, and they're also required not to operate their vehicle under the influence of alcohol or drugs or other illicit substances, not everyone listens to the rules. And so, unfortunately, while we can put rules in place, we can't necessarily guarantee that everyone's going to follow them. There's always going to be somebody who's going to step out of line. It is the way it is. And so, going back to insurance companies are required when they initially sell you a policy. They are required under Texas law to offer you two types of insurance that protect just you. Just you. The first one is called PIP, which is personal injury protection. It means if you break your glasses, if you miss time from work, up to whatever your limits are, regardless of whether the accident was your fault or not, PIP or personal injury protection will protect those damages and will pay you back for those damages. The insurance companies are required to offer it to you, and if you decline it, they are required to get your declination, I think that's right, in writing. The second kind is the kind that protects you in the situation where either you're hit by someone who's not insured at all, or somebody who, like the drunk driver that hit me, is underinsured. They didn't have enough insurance to cover all the damages. Okay? That's UMUIM. So that would be the underinsured motorist side. The insurance companies are also required to offer you that, also to get your declination in writing if you're not going to accept it. But if you don't have those two types of insurance, you need to call up your insurance agent and get it. It doesn't cost as much as you think. PIP is typically, a couple of bucks, maybe $20 for the 6-month period. And depending on your UIM limits, it's maybe an extra $50, $100. But it guarantees that if you're hit by somebody who doesn't have a license, who isn't insured, who, may have taken the vehicle without permission or in fact stolen it, under those circumstances, you would be covered under that form of coverage. And if you decline it, you will wish you had it under those circumstances, I promise.
Okay. So if I'm just out and about driving around, somebody without insurance hits me and I don't have UIM, I'm just out of luck. Like my normal insurance wouldn't cover that.
Your liability and collision will not cover you if you are hit by an uninsured motorist, because it's not designed that way. The liability, or when you hear people say liability only, that means it only protects the other person if you mess up. UMUIM is if the other person messed up and didn't have insurance, you're still fully protected. So the general liability only isn't for you, it's for them. That's why UMUIM and PIP are so important, because they truly protect you. They'll protect your family members in the car. If your wife's out there driving, it will protect her. If your kid's in the car, if your friends are in the car with you and you just happen to get hit, it will provide protection for them too. And it's so important to have that, particularly because at the end of the day, we know we can't protect ourselves from everybody out there. If you've driven the freeways in Houston, or quite frankly anywhere else lately, you realize that most people are driving while texting, or they're driving while eating or changing the radio or whatever it is, whatever the app is that they're looking at on their phone, they're distracted from driving. And that distraction takes a second or two to change your life. And under those circumstances, I have seen some of the saddest cases where I couldn't help somebody because the person that hit them had no insurance, and there was no insurance on their own side as well. And so you're literally left with nothing, which is, in my opinion, it's the saddest thing in the world, to be hit by somebody else, to have no protection, and to basically be told, well, you're on your own. That's why we decided to require auto insurance to begin with. And while we continue to require it, we can't guarantee everybody has it. That's why UMUIM is something you should get to protect not only you, but your own family, your friends, anyone else who rides in the car with you, because we know uninsured motorists are out there every day.
Right. And for us law-abiding citizens, we have insurance. So what is the penalty for not having insurance?
I mean, unfortunately, there's really not one. Okay. A lot of times they'll get a ticket for no insurance, and that ticket maybe costs $100. Sometimes, for example, if in our scenario where you rear-ended me, let's assume that you were not insured, your insurance had lapsed a week earlier and you just hadn't gotten around to paying the premiums, and my insurance ultimately ends up having to cover the property damage to my vehicle because I have UMUIM. My insurance company can turn around after they've paid to fix my car. My insurance company can turn around and sue you directly. Okay. And say, hi, Jeff. We're the insurance company for Jen. We had to pay to fix her car after you hit her because you didn't have insurance. We'd like our money back. Okay. And so sometimes they will work out payment plans. I've represented several insurance companies that did that kind of stuff. But the insurance companies do want their money back if they're having to pay out because you didn't have insurance as you were required to do.
And that's if I, who was hit, have UMUIM.
No, that's if you were hitting me and I had UMUIM.
Yes.
You're the bad guy here. We've already dealt with this, right?
Okay. All right, that's good to know. So let's go to our last case we're going to talk about.
Sure.
this case was on, I've been told, one of the most dangerous freeways in Texas, 45 North. Can you kind of talk about what happened and the kind of the nuts and bolts of, or as much as you can, nuts and bolts of how you dealt with the defendants, because it is a company that we went after, and how you were able to get this person's widow compensation for her husband.
Sure. This is really a very sad case. It involved a gentleman who had gotten up that morning like he did 5 days a week and was going to work. And he would go to work at about 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning. I know, early riser, way earlier than me. And I have a lot of respect for that. You know, the fact that he was on the road, going out, and on that particular morning, he just happened to be in the wrong place in the wrong time. There was a commercial vehicle driver who had a trailer, and the trailer was not properly secured. And so as the 18-wheeler driver, or commercial vehicle driver, entered the freeway, as he continued to accelerate, the tractor and trailer were not secured together. And as speeds go up, eventually the, basically ties and not bolts and other things broke away. And so the trailer began to freely fall backwards because it no longer has an engine. And so as it's going backwards, it ultimately, several vehicles are able to avoid it. A vehicle does end up striking part of it, which causes it to begin to spin on the freeway. And at that point, the gentleman that we represented was unable to avoid the path of it because it now stretches across essentially all of the lanes of traffic. And ultimately, it took off the upper passenger compartment above the door handle of his entire vehicle. And it caused some very significant injuries to him. And then there was cab footage that showed that once his vehicle came to rest after that, it became almost immediately engulfed in flames. And so the last moments of that gentleman's life were excruciating and awful, and that's no way for somebody to leave this world.
Right. Okay. And then we were presented the case, or we brought the case in. What goes into something like that? Because like I assume that his widow is our client, right?
His widow and his father.
Okay. So do they even know what happened at this point? They have the police report, but they don't really know what happened, right? They don't. We had to do some investigation on. Of course.
So I think that's a great question. So generally, we will get an initial police report. We'll get an initial statement from what people think has happened, either what they've heard from a police officer, a witness, and then it's our job to start that true investigation. I consider us to kind of be the civil investigators as opposed to the criminal side for like the police department or something like that.
Was this a criminal case?
It ultimately didn't end up being a criminal case because it doesn't rise to that level. Okay. Typically criminal.
It was an accident.
Yeah, it was an accident. It just, but it's one of those things where it was just such a terrible circumstance and terrible series of events. The one issue that did arise is we were able to get dash cam footage in that case, and we were able to establish that at least there were some indicators to the driver before he entered the freeway that he needed to check the connections. Okay. At least there were, he kept looking back, kept like every time you'd kind of see the chassis bump, he'd kind of look around. At one point he almost gets out of the vehicle and doesn't. And so we were able to establish that, look, there's enough smoke here to be able to establish that he at least knew or should have known that something was wrong. And before he decided to get all the way onto the freeway and the interstate going 70, 75 miles an hour, there were, no less than 10 gas stations that he passed where he could have easily pulled over to the side away from the pumps and just made sure everything was all right. And that's what we ask of most people. If you think that you've got a wobbly tire, if you think that something's wrong with your vehicle, don't keep on trucking down the road. Stop at the next exit, go to the nearest gas station, have it checked out, pop the hood, check the tires, whatever it takes. But, don't put your own life or someone else's life at risk simply because you're trying to get somewhere you don't want to deal with it. Because if it happens to somebody else and you take a loved one from them, I can't imagine a bigger tragedy than that, really. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do is coupled with some very, very sad stories. We've had cases where, gentleman was run over by a garbage truck, and the only way that anyone could figure out what had happened to him, because his remains were essentially just left in the roadway, was actually through Ring doorbell cameras. 3 of them from the neighborhood. They were able to establish the times, showed that he was in the yard beforehand, and then unfortunately his remains were in the street afterwards. That video evidence, that data, that surveillance footage, it disappears so quickly. And if you don't have the right people, if you don't hire the right people, it can disappear forever. And then, like I said, it's a he said, she said. So our firm motto is who you hire matters. And we hope that that's true in every case where we represent a client. We hope that you feel like you matter to us and that we made a difference in the settlement value and that we ultimately were able to recover over and above as much as we possibly could based on the facts and circumstances of the case and the damages, injuries, or in some cases, death.
All right. Well, Jen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been very informative. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I invite everybody, call your insurance agent, go get yourself UIM, or PIP. If you haven't already, protect yourself, protect your family. It's important. And thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys.